afternoon. Welcome to Les Sables d'Olonne on the west coast of France. It's Friday, it's day 19 on the race course, and things are hotting up in some areas, but down the south, Charlie Dallin is into the roaring 40s and moving clear. It's almost the weekend then, but who's counting really? Certainly not the skippers out on the water, nor indeed us here in Vendée Globe HQ. Every day is a work day, unfortunately. Work for Thomas Riong has been climbing his mast yesterday morning and during the afternoon and evening, cutting off the port foil. Also, you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to work out that Alex Thompson has continued to have a little bit of work to do, but on the 30-minute speed gun up to midday, Alex was doing 21 knots, and so I think we can say the boss is back. He's downwind and he's getting it down to the south, and that really is what Hugo Boss is built for. Meantime, as I say, in the roaring 40s at 41 degrees south, Charlie Dallin is making more than 20 knots on the speed gun with 260 miles of advance, and his course is 81 degrees, so approximately east, heading towards the Cape of Good Hope. And our guest today is Marcus Hutchinson of LinkedOut and the Thomas Riong racing team. Marcus, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. We're going to have a look at the video. This is Thomas's update from this morning when he explains everything that's been going on board Thomas Riong's boat on the LinkedOut.
Bon, c'est la dernière pétole avant l'autoroute du Sud. J'en ai profité pour remonter dans mon mât et c'est bon. J'ai de nouveau mes deux girouettes qui fonctionnent bien. J'ai changé une des pales, mes deux hooks de tête qui fonctionnent nickel, mes deux drisses. Donc je suis vraiment content là. Voilà, j'ai retrouvé le bateau comme avant. Bon, maintenant j'ai mon foil bâbord qui est bien fissuré, et donc je vais devoir le couper. Voilà, donc ça c'est la mission de cet après-midi avant de retrouver du vent. Voilà, donc ça va pas être une opération simple, mais c'est comme ça si je veux garder voilà, l'intégrité de mon bateau. Je viens de couper mon joli foil. Voilà, donc on a coupé le bout pour enlever de la puissance dans l'appendice. Comme ça je peux garder ce morceau là sans risque, parce que le risque c'est que le foil casse et que ça crée des dommages collatéraux. Donc voilà, c'est une petite mission quand même là. Et là je suis dans la pétole, je vais essayer de m'en sortir quand même là, parce que j'avance pas beaucoup là depuis tout à l'heure. Allez, à plus.
Well, Marcus, then a little bit of a mission then for Thomas Riong. How has it been for you guys behind closed doors at Mission Control there?
Well, the technical team and the designers and engineers that are involved with our team have been working flat out for the last day and a half to try and understand what the situation was, and to do some simulations and to work out what the safest solution was for Thomas, bearing in mind that foil is structurally extremely compromised. Anyway, they came to the conclusion yesterday that we had to amputate the extremity of the foil to maintain some level of safety margin with what's left in the boat. And anyway, they did that yesterday, and off they go. The team done an incredible job. It's always good to see coordination amongst technical people to find solutions in a hurry to a situation which is actually quite precarious when you think about it. I mean, there we could see there was absolutely no wind, but I can tell you a few hours later we're going quite quickly, and within a few more hours we're going to have quite a lot of wind in that part of the world, and excuse me, and so we really had to get on with it as quickly as possible. Anyway, we just spoke to Thomas again just about an hour ago, and he's moving quite quickly on his way straight south. He's got to get across the fleet and as far south as possible before he jives over, and we'll be seeing him back in the race at almost full potential anyway, very shortly.
I'll ask you a little bit more about that in a second, but I'm going to throw this internet question to you from Paul. He was asking what the thought process is to cut the foil just 2 meters from the tip rather than closer to the hull.
Well, the operation of doing it was one of the most important things. How can you get a guy to go out there on the foil and cut it? Obviously, the more you cut off, the more danger there is to the person doing the cutting. And also the question is whether we could, it's very difficult to explain, but basically all of the damage is in the part that's in the hull, in the foil case. And the more load you put on it from a bigger lever arm, the more damage, more chances are that you're going to have it, you're going to do collateral damage inside the hull. To answer that question simply, the foil where it comes out of the hull is probably 3 times as thick as it is where he cut it. And to have the tools to cut it at that point, well, we just don't have them on board. That's, it's about 5 or 6 inches thick, solid carbon to cut through, whereas where he cut it, it was actually quite a lot slimmer.
And how much is the boat compromised then? You obviously have lost the leverage, the righting moment of the foil, but you still can set up the boat with the ballast and the keel. So what potential do we have now?
Well, in sheer number terms, it's difficult to estimate that. I'm sure the designers and team are working on estimations as to what the polars would be, but the reality is that the boat is compromised on starboard. We don't have as much righting moment as we used to. Whether it's 10% or 20% or 50%, it's definitely not 50%. It's probably 2 or 3 or 4 knots when the boat is being used at its full potential. I think also I was listening to one of your comments on the previous show that when Mark Guillemot was talking about the fact that it's a hard race or super foot to the floor kind of race on the way down the Atlantic, but once they get into the Southern Ocean, most of the skippers tend to lift the foot a little bit on the accelerator and try and keep themselves safe and maybe not exploit the full potential of their boat until they get back into the Atlantic again. I'm sure that'll be the case naturally for everybody, but in our case, clearly it's almost done for us in some respects on starboard tack. We are able to use the boat differently because when we are using the full foil strength, obviously we can't use full ballast configuration because we generate too much righting moment and the mast wouldn't have been able to support that. So we're in a different situation. So the boat will be sailed differently, clearly on starboard tack to port tack. We will be able to use ballast on starboard tack more in different configurations than was the case before. So the boat is going to be compromised on starboard. It's going to be, at times, it's going to be as much as 4 or 5 knots, but at times it's going to be, maybe as little as 2 or 3 knots.
Okay, Marcus, I'll come back to you in just 1 second. We're going to look at the standings as at midday today. And as we said, Charlie Dillon moving quite well. He's doing 20.7 knots on the 30-minute speed gun, and he's now 262 miles ahead of Thomas Rion. Thomas doing 13.5 knots on the 30-minute speed gun. Jean Le Cam is in third at 365 miles behind the leader. Yannick Bestaven is now up in fourth. He's 13 miles ahead of Kevin Escoffier, who's in fifth. Kevin is then 29 miles ahead of Boris Herrmann in sixth, who in turn is 13 miles ahead of Sébastien Simon. Louis Burton in 8th is 45 miles up on Sam Davis, who's 9th, and Giancarlo Pedotti, our Italian skipper, is now up to 10th place. Alex Thompson's in 11th, and as I said, the good news for Hugo Boss fans is that Alex was doing 21 knots onto the 30-minute position report, a 30-minute speed gun, and is going quick. He is, however, 650 miles behind Charlie Dallin just now. Looking down for the rest of our internationals, well, Alan Rura going pretty well just now in 18th. He's giving chase to Clarice Kremer, which he has been for quite some time. Stefan Lederezon, by the way, has caught up very nicely over the last 2 or 3 days. Didac Costa is in 22nd, going well. Pip here has lost a few miles to Didac, unfortunately, over the last 36 hours. And going down the table, Miranda Merrin in 27th, Ari Husela in 29th, and Kojiro Shiraishi is through the doldrums and is doing 11.3 knots this morning on DMJ Morai 1. So Marcus, a few more questions just in general. Tell us about the construction of the foils. Are they too light, or what's the balance there in terms of how you design and build these foils? Presumably, if they become stronger and heavier, then you have more danger of collateral damage.
Oh, it's a hugely complex subject, Andy. I'm not necessarily the best person to ask that kind of question. Clearly, the foils take a massive load, and they've been growing more and more with every new generation of boat. We're obviously very surprised at this failure because these foils were a lot stronger than the V1 foils that we had. The V1 foils are very similar to the foils that are on Charlie Dallin's boat. Obviously not made by the same person. I don't want to compare like with like, but clearly, you know, we've all got a lot to learn from these things, whether it's you know, design understanding, whether it's construction understanding, whether it's operation, whether we hit something. We just don't know at this stage, and it's going to be difficult to really be able to make assessment until we've seen the foil when it comes back as to what the problems were. They're getting heavier and heavier. Those foils weigh 280 kilos each. It's almost pure carbon. There's a bit of foam in the fairing and things like that. Clearly, when you see the photographs of the boats going fast, you can understand the loads that are on them and the extra structure that's inside the boat with the, because you see the outside, but you never see the inside of the structure around the foil cases is just phenomenal. These boats are really so much tougher than they were before. We've still got an awful lot way to go with these, with foil design and what have you. And we don't really know what happened there as to why it failed. Obviously, we'll be looking into it and we'll share that information with everybody afterwards, but obviously pretty disappointed about that.
Indeed. I mean, one thing that's been interesting, for example, when we look at the Hugo Boss workshop on board, the amount of materials and the tools that they take with them, how do you prepare for these kind of contingencies? What do you plan with the team in advance? Well,
in the case of Hugo Boss, I mean, amazing, and hats off to the team on Alex Thompson Racing and the Hugo Boss team, because they did not only an amazing job to repair that, and I really hope that what he did holds tight for the whole way around. I was actually quite surprised, and think we were all, to see the extent of the damage in there, and also the amount of extra material he'd taken with him. There were huge amounts of panels and things like that. You know, we all take spare parts with us, but to quite have that much, you know, well, we don't have that much equipment on board to rebuild the boat. But you know, these things are really a question of each team's experience. We do have a lot of bits and pieces. We've got resin kits, we've got plate, a bit like Alex, but maybe not quite the same quantity and volume. But for something like a foil, it's impossible to repair that without seeing it here. Even in the workshop, it'd probably be impossible to repair it.
Thank you, Marcus. Well, as I say, the skipper's now getting down into the full Southern Ocean experience. Charlie Dallin down at 41 degrees south. Boris Herrmann is getting down towards these latitudes as well. And he sent us this video. He's seen his first albatross and he's explaining how life is changing as he gets south.
Look here. I think that's going to be my friend for the next month. A grey world and a grey sky. Finally, I would say we are in the south. We are south of the high pressure. I have seen the first albatross yesterday, so that is the official entering in the Southern Ocean. Sea is still pretty flat, but it got colder, 15 degrees this morning. And yeah, it looks as it is expected. We have our position here. Here's Cape Town. Here's South America. And here's a low pressure with the front. and that's moving with us and overtaking us, and when the front goes over, then we jibe or something like that. Here's Tristan da Cunha, Go Island. So look these up on Google, interesting places. And yeah, why did I lose a couple of miles on Maitre Coq? I was right next with him when we were both going to the Janaker, from the Code Zero to the Janaker. And I felt something strange when I hooked the Janaker, so I wanted to make sure I can unhook. And I couldn't. After many times, many tries, I then went up the rig pretty hasty, because the light was just falling down. The night was just falling upon us. And it worked well. I could manage to unhook it, but it was quite an effort, so I'm a bit tired this morning. Happy it worked. Quite proud of it, because it's really not my favorite exercise. I'm scared of height, and there was not much wind, but you're still thrown around quite a bit. And then you need both hands to work, and so on and so on. And it was dark, and I didn't want to take my helmet off, so I didn't have a lamp. I didn't fix the headlamp on the helmet. I had a headlamp with me, but not on my head. Anyway, that worked all well, and I'm glad to be here. And let's see if we can at least keep the distance with the PRB and Maitre Coq. Cheers, have a good day. Bye.
That indeed is Boris Herrmann on Sea Explorer, Yacht Club de Monaco. Marcus, it seems to me we've had a lot of skippers climbing the mast. Is this unusual for this race?
I don't think it's particularly unusual to go up the mast at least once before you get to the Southern Ocean for a last checkover. For sure, there's different skippers have different points of view about it. People who don't like heights, for starters. I mean, obviously, it's an extremely physical thing to get up there. There's nothing to hold on. It's not like a conventional mast with the spreaders and rigging and things to hold on to. It's a nice, smooth, slippery carbon surface. So there's not a lot to... and it's a huge way up there, and these boats do jump about a hell of a lot. So it's not anybody's, it's an obligation to go up, I think, at least once before the South to make sure everything's all right. But going up to fix things, well, you know, these things happen. In our case, I think Tom has been up and down 4 or 5 times now, which is definitely more than you normally would. But you know, these things happen. They're mechanical things. You have to go and check it all and make sure that things are being used properly. So.
Not something I would anticipate doing at any stage, but what are the methods for getting up the mast? There was another question with this, you know, we've had from the internet several times since the start. How do you get up there?
Well, not sitting in a bosun's chair and having somebody wind you up on a winch, because there is nobody to wind you up. You've got to pull yourself up, and you use I don't know what the English term is, but it's basically a rock climbing harness and an ascender situation. So you have a rope, either a halyard or a rope attached to the masthead, and you clip onto that and use a sort of clutch system to pull yourself up arm over arm. It is a long way up. These masts are 27 meters above the deck, I think, something like that. And quite often you have tools and bits and pieces in a bag underneath. So it's not just your own body weight, it's everything else you're pulling up with you. And maybe even a halyard or something like that, if you're replacing a halyard. It takes a bit of time. Clearly you want to get up there as quickly as possible, but you be careful to choose your moment, set the boat up so that it's as stable as possible with sails trimmed just right, so that the boat is heeling over a little bit and not upright and just rolling around. The other thing to remember as well is Boris mentioned it there, you wear a helmet, obviously, because you want to make sure you get thrown around. And when you're at the top, you can clip yourself on, but when you're on your way up, you can't clip yourself on. You really are at the mercy of the ropes and pulling yourself up. But helmet, and then it is what he was mentioning as well, doing it at night. It was something interesting, remarking. Make sure that the helmet has got a proper lamp attached to it, so that when you get up there, if it's dark, you can see around, because it's an awful lot of effort. You really need to prepare it carefully and really imagine absolutely everything you're going to need when you get up there. You can't just pop down because you forgot the wrong screwdriver. So yeah, it's a lot of work.
Indeed, Marcus. Anyway, listen, thank you so much for your input today. Join us again in a few days, and have a quiet weekend, Marcus.
Thanks very much, Andy.
So it's Marcus Hutchinson, the team manager of LinkedOut, Thomas Riong's racing team, explaining all the details of their situation with the foils. Let's have a look at the weather situation. We're looking towards the Cape of Good Hope, and in fact even onwards to the Kerguelen Islands, and it's looking like a fairly fast run for the leaders. Well, Friday's weather, once again, we're kind of focusing on the front of the fleet because it is, in many respects, most interesting. As we see Apivia, Charlie Dallin, very much down into the roaring 40s now, having escaped from the light winds of this high-pressure system. Not so easy for Thomas Riong, but he is moving quite well and coming directly south to get onto this easterly moving low-pressure train. Now, looking at the best positioned really in terms of this low pressure over here, the red and orange is the stronger winds of this low pressure, which is tracking east down here. You can see Buru Valley is just ahead of, this is Sam Davis, just to weather at the moment of Buru Valley, and they're in this building northwesterly wind, and they will ride the front of this front, and they'll be the first to get that just round about just now. You can also see further in towards the centre of the high, you've got Matricock and also Alex Thompson back here. Now the key is going to be who gets on this front, and at the moment it's looking pretty marginal for Alex, having lost some time last night. And otherwise, looking at Jean Le Cam, still struggling just a little bit to get out of the high, but he's heading more directly to the south. And then this group up here are still on the curve of the high. They're in nice northerly breezes and coming down with speed. So that's our first chart. And then briefly, if we just look at this one here, this is the animation, which will just run just to give you a clearer view of what's going on. Watching Charlie Dallin here, this is the ice barrier, the exclusion zone. You can see that he's having to work quite close to that initially because he's got the lighter winds to the north. And then this group really on the edge of the low pressure coming forward, quite compact, a really good race for them. As I say, probably 7 to 8 boats back, and we start to see the split as this high pressure evolves again behind them. But and again, this bit here, we're looking at Charlie Dallin coming up quite relatively close towards the Cape of Good Hope, certainly routing up to the north. But up there we get the Agulhas current, and that creates quite unsettled big seas against the prevailing wind direction. And so that's one thing certainly for Charlie Dallin to watch. But you can see that in general the fleet does compact up a little bit. So that's our that is indeed our animation. And just very briefly, let's look at this, which is Charal coming down into the doldrums. The doldrums quite active, and so not really a great situation for Jeremy Bayou at the moment. He's going to have to he's working his way, we can see, to the west, and he will cross round about here where there's less cloud, and it should be a little bit less agitated for him, but not easy for Bayou. But at the front, Charlie Dallin going well. And indeed he is. Someone else who's going well is Sam Davis. Sam saw her first albatross, and she's into the south and really relishing a month in the south. You're into the south. You've seen your first albatross. How is it?
It's great to go in the right direction finally, and heading towards Cape of Good Hope. And yeah, the first time is the albatrosses today, and they're just amazing pictures, and it's been ages since I've seen some albatrosses. It's been ages since I've been in the Southern Ocean, and it's just a symbol that's I guess it's a beautiful symbol, and it's something that these albatrosses they're gonna accompany. They're gonna come with us all the way around the world, and in this world, this area, there's not really much civilization, not really anything, and it's nice to have a bit of company. So it's great to see that the albatrosses are still there, and they're really keen to follow us like Jesus. And the wind's been building since yesterday afternoon. I cut the corner a little bit too much, which was a bit frustrating because I was with Louis, and now he's got ahead, but I'm still happy to be where I am, and and the boat's set up well now to go fast downwind. We had lots of time over the last few days to prepare everything and to feel well set up and ready to deal with whatever we're going to get thrown at us over the next few weeks. And yeah, it was great. It's been a great 24 hours of sailing now. Downwind, the kind of sailing that we're expecting. Downwind with a big Jenica up. The waves aren't very big, so there's not really much surfing, but it's great downwind fast sailing, and for the moment it's pretty nice because the sea stays flat and the sun's out, so it doesn't quite feel like we're in the Southern Ocean yet.
But in the meantime, Sam, it's a month in the Southern Ocean. What's the mindset at this stage? You just take each day as it comes.
Yeah, it's quite daunting to think that we're going to be here for so long, and I keep measuring it and to see if it's really true that's how long it is. And so yeah, for sure it's a bit difficult to imagine everything that's going to happen over the next month, and that we're really going to spend a month down here in the freezing cold, going really fast. But luckily I've got the memories of last Vendée Globe that I did, and I just remember the time going pretty quickly. And I also remember dividing it up as well, and so I've got my little lines on my chart. They're kind of like the milestones that I'm going to make to get past the first one, Cape of Good Hope, obviously, the longitude of Cape of Good Hope, and then the Kerguelen, and then the west coast of Australia, the east coast, and so I kind of divide it into small hops, and that makes it a little bit easier to imagine what's going to happen over the next few weeks.
That's the best way. Sam, you're doing a fantastic job. We had Tracy Edwards on the programme yesterday, and she sends you her best regards and says she's so proud of you.
That's so nice of her. You know, she sent me a card, and well, with quite a few of the crew members from Royal and Sun Life. I've got it here. I'll show you. And it's really amazing because Tracy was my hero when I was growing up, and what she did was amazing. And probably what she did is kind of made me do what I do. And then finally I got to sail with her, and my first trip around the world was with Tracy as skipper. So that's just amazing to end up with your hero, your skipper, when you're 22 years old. And with Miranda on board, and Helena, who works with Tech Hair. And so Tracy made me this card. I'm trying to get it in the picture. So it's a picture of me on the bow of our catamaran all that time ago. And it says, so proud of you and thinking of you every day. And she wrote this really inspiring message inside. So it's great to have these experiences. And quite often when you do something like that with a crew, then that crew remains your friend forever.
Fantastic. I think we can safely say that you're Tracy's hero now.
Yeah, it's really funny reading her card, and it's funny how the roles reverse. It's quite weird.
So that's Sam Davis then doing a great job on Initiative Kerr. Now, Didac Costa is a skipper we do have a little bit of a communication issue with because he speaks mainly Spanish. And so we connected him today with Aleix Gelabert, who is his co-skipper from the Barcelona World Race. And hopefully we have Aleix online from Barcelona.
Hello, Andy. How are you?
Very good indeed. So tell us, how is Didac? What was he saying today when you caught up with him?
Well, I spoke with him a few minutes and I was surprised. He was really happy. He told me that he was having great fun and enjoying a lot the Vendée.
Indeed. Now tell me something. He has so this race he's removed his dagger boards and he's sailing without the dagger boards.
Yes, for this edition he decided to remove the dagger boards and the cases because he thought was too much weight for the boat. He wanted to make the boat lighter, So he decided to remove the dagger boards, knowing that maybe in upwind conditions he will be a little bit penalized. But I spoke with him because they had already quite a few upwind situations, and he was quite happy about the boat and the performance that was doing with the boat. So he knows he loses a little bit, but he thought maybe his thinking was that maybe he could have been lost more, and it's surprised that the boat is still quite performing.
It did say it's going.
And now he believes that from now on, probably he will not use the dagger doors so much, because now mostly will be downwind conditions, and he thinks that with a little bit lighter the boat will be a little bit more performing than the previous Vendée.
And Aleix, and the key thing for him is he's in a race, whereas this time in the last race, he had obviously had to restart and he was on his own.
Yes, that's true. I asked him about what his feeling of really racing in the Vendée, and he was very happy to have someone besides who could make him push a little bit harder than the last Vendée, because he left 4 days behind the rest of the fleet, and until he arrived to Cape Town, he didn't have any real contact with the other participants. Now he is in a small group with other competitors, with Medaglia, with Arnaud Bossiers, and now they have Armel Tripon, which is going to pass him. He knows he's going to pass him because of the defense of the boat, but he's enjoying this contact with the people and trying also to push a little bit more, but being conscious that the race is too long and try to not push too much and save a little bit for the rest of the race, the boat.
Listen, Aleix, thank you so much for connecting with us and with your ex-co-skipper Didac. Do join us again at different times through the race. Aleix Gilabert, thank you.
Thank you to you. It was a pleasure.
So that's all we have time for today with our Vendée Globe Live. Our guest tomorrow will be from Auckland, Guillaume Verdier, who is the designer of the top 2 boats. He's also got a boat in the Trophy Jules Verne, and of course challenging for the America's Cup. So any questions for Guillaume Verdier, do post them on our social media channels, preferably over the course of this afternoon, this evening, because we will speak to him early in the morning, our time, and during the night, Auckland time. But meantime, do join us again tomorrow then, same time, the same place on our Vendée Globe Live.